The Montana Territory was still half wilderness in those days, miles of pine, cold rivers that bit through stone, and silence thick enough to make a man hear his own regrets. That was where Luke Carver rode, alone, dust-stained, and carrying more past than gear. He'd spent 10 years scouting for the Army, watching men die for land they couldn't tame. When the wars ended and the world moved on, Luke didn't. He just kept riding west until there weren't any more rails, any more towns, any more noise. That's when he found the notice. Cabin for sale, high ridge of Bitterroot, cheap, remote, perfect. He figured he'd buy the place, fix it up, and live out whatever was left of his life where nobody could find him. The trail up the ridge was steep, twisting through pines so thick the sunlight came down in broken pieces. His horse, Rusty, snorted hard at the climb, and Luke's shoulder ached from an old wound he'd long stopped talking about. But when he finally reached the clearing, the pain slipped clean away. The cabin stood there like it had been waiting for him. One-room log building, roof sagging in the middle, chimney still proud. Behind it, a creek whispered over smooth stones, and the whole valley below was painted gold by late afternoon light. Luke dismounted slow, taking off his hat. "Well," he murmured, "guess this is home." He stepped up on the porch, boards creaking under his boots. A hawk screamed somewhere overhead, echoing off the cliffs. When he pushed the door open, a breath of cool air met him. Wood smoke, dust, and something faintly sweet, like dried lilac. The place looked abandoned, but not ruined. Table, stove, bedroll. Even a kettle sitting by the hearth. Luke frowned. The sale agent in Missoula swore nobody'd lived here in years. He called out just in case. "Anybody home?" Silence. Then a sound, soft, quick, like fabric brushing wood. Luke's hand went to the Colt on his belt. "Show yourself," he said, his voice low but sure. From the far corner, a figure rose. She stepped into the light like part of the mountain had decided to take shape. A young woman, maybe 20, barefoot on the rough floor, hair the color of wheat in sunlight. Her dress was plain and clean, though patched at the hem. Her eyes, steady and gray, looked at him without fear. Luke blinked once. "Didn't mean to spook you, miss. I was told this cabin was empty." "It was," she said quietly, "until I came back." Her voice carried that mountain calm. Soft but firm. The kind that made a man listen. Luke lowered his gun. "Name's Carver. Bought this place from a land office down in Missoula. If you're squatting, we'll figure something friendly." She shook her head. "I ain't squatting. I live here. Always have." Luke studied her. "That's so? Thought the last owners died years ago." "They did," she said. "My father and mother." She pointed to 2 small crosses out near the pine line. "Buried 'em myself." Luke's throat tightened. "You live here alone?" She nodded once. "Since I was 15? For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled low. Outside, the creek kept whispering. He cleared his throat. "Didn't mean to trespass, miss. If you say this is yours, I'll ride back to town and—" "No," she interrupted. "Stay." Luke blinked. "Beg pardon?" Her gaze didn't waver. "You bought this place fair. Paper says it's yours now. Maybe that's how it's meant to be." "That's kind of you," he said slowly. "But I don't make a habit of taking another soul's home." She smiled, just barely. "It ain't another soul's no more. It's ours now if you want it." Luke felt a strange chill at that word. Ours. He didn't know this woman, yet there was something in her tone that settled deep, like she'd been waiting to say it. "What's your name?" he asked. Clara Wilder, she said. My father built this cabin with his hands. He said one day the mountain would send me someone who needed it more than I did. Luke gave a dry laugh. Sounds like tall talk. Clara's eyes softened. He never lied. That night rain came sudden and hard. Luke patched the roof where he could and set his saddle under the porch eave. Clara moved around the small room with quiet skill, lighting a lamp, stirring soup over the fire. She didn't ask him much, where he'd come from, why he'd bought the cabin. Maybe she could already tell from the way he stared into the flames like he saw ghosts there. After supper, she poured him coffee thick enough to stand a spoon. You're running from something, she said. It wasn't a question. Luke looked up sharply. Ain't we all? Clara nodded. Some run to forget, some to remember. He didn't answer. Outside, the wind howled down the chimney, making the fire dance. When she finally rose to clear the cups, he caught himself watching her hands, steady, strong, yet gentle. She wasn't the kind of woman a man met in towns. She carried herself like she belonged to the earth itself. Why'd you stay here all these years? He asked. She hesitated, glancing toward the window where rain streaked the glass. Because of a promise, she said. One I made before my pa died. What kind of promise? Her voice dropped to a whisper. To wait. For what? For the man the mountain would send. Luke's chest tightened. He laughed softly to hide it. You think that's me? I don't know yet, she said, turning back to the fire. But the mountain never lies. Long after she'd gone to her corner to sleep, Luke lay awake on the floor near the hearth. The rain eased to a drizzle, and the air smelled of pine and smoke. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face in the firelight, calm, unreadable, beautiful in a way that made him uneasy. He told himself he'd ride out come morning, head back to town, set the land office straight. But part of him knew he wouldn't. The mountain had its hooks in him now, same as her. Just before dawn, he woke to a sound outside, soft footfalls crunching wet earth. He rose quiet, grabbed his rifle, and eased to the window. In the dim gray light, he saw Clara standing by the two crosses beneath the pines, her hands clasped, head bowed. She was speaking low, the words lost in the wind, but Luke could tell it wasn't prayer. It sounded more like she was talking to someone. When she turned back toward the cabin, her face was pale, eyes distant. She froze when she saw him watching. Couldn't sleep, he said quickly, setting the rifle aside. Clara nodded once, walking past him. You'll learn soon, she murmured. The mountain don't sleep neither. Luke frowned. You talk like this place is alive. Her gaze met his. It is. It remembers everything, and it never forgets a promise. She disappeared into the back room, leaving him alone with the dying fire and a heart that wouldn't settle. Outside, the first light touched the peaks. Somewhere deep in those pines, a wolf cried once, long and low, as if warning him that whatever secret Clara Wilder kept, it was buried in the same soil that now held her parents. Luke sat there a long time, watching the mountains wake, knowing that what he'd bought wasn't just a cabin. It was a story he'd stepped into, and the woman who waited inside it already knew the end. The morning came slow, gray, and wet. The rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving a mist that clung to the pines and drifted like breath from the mountain itself. Luke Carver stepped out onto the porch, stretching the ache from his shoulders, and looked out across the valley. The world was quiet except for the creek and the whisper of wind through pine needles. Behind him, the door creaked open. Clara Wilder stepped out barefoot, her hair undone, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She moved like she belonged to the mist, soft, certain, untouchable. "You were up early," she said, her voice light but steady. Luke nodded. "Couldn't sleep much. Kept thinking about what you said last night." She tilted her head. "About the mountain?" "About the promise," he said. Her eyes went distant for a moment, then she nodded toward the hills. "You'll understand in time." Luke sighed. "Seems like every word out of your mouth's half a riddle." Clara smiled faintly. "You'll learn that's how the mountain talks, too." The next few days passed quiet, but not easy. Luke fixed what he could, patched the roof, mended the barn door, cleaned out the old stove. He didn't ask Clara many questions, but his eyes asked plenty. And though she worked beside him, milking the goats, splitting wood, hanging laundry to dry, she never gave him more than what she wanted him to know. Sometimes, at dusk, he'd find her sitting by the creek with her feet in the water, humming a tune he didn't recognize. When he asked where she'd learned it, she said, "My mother sang it when the wind howled. Said it keeps the mountain from crying." Luke chuckled softly. "You talk like this place is alive." She turned to him, eyes glinting. "You ever think it ain't?" He didn't answer that. But at night, when the wind slipped down the chimney and the cabin groaned like something breathing, he started to wonder if maybe she was right. On the fourth evening, as the sun bled down behind the ridge, Luke found Clara sitting on the porch rail, watching the sky. She looked peaceful, but there was a sadness about her that made his chest tighten. "Your folks?" he said quietly. "They die up here?" Clara nodded. "Winter of '79. Fever took Ma. Pa went soon after. Said he couldn't live without her." "I'm sorry." She shrugged. "Mountain takes what it wants." Luke studied her profile in the last light, the curve of her jaw, the way her fingers traced patterns on the rail. "Why didn't you leave? You were just a girl." "I tried once," she said softly. "Walked down to the valley, made it as far as the river. But the mountain called me back." "Called you?" he repeated. She looked at him then, and he realized she wasn't speaking in fancy words. She meant it. "My pa used to say the mountain chooses its people," she said. "Some belong to it, some don't. Me, I was born from its breath. I'll die here." Luke felt a chill slide down his spine that had nothing to do with the air. "You really believe that?" "I know it," she said simply. That night, the storm came back. It wasn't hard rain, just steady and mean, the kind that creeps under the roof and drums on your bones. The fire burned low, and Luke sat by it, carving at a stick with his knife. Clara was at the table mending one of his shirts. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them had grown easier somehow, like they'd both decided it didn't need filling. Then, sudden and sharp, came a sound outside. A twig snap, followed by another. Luke's hand went straight to his gun. "You got visitors up this way often?" Clara's eyes flicked toward the window. "No one comes up here. Not unless they're lost." He rose, holstered his gun, and stepped toward the door. The wind pushed against it as he opened it just enough to look out. The mist had thickened, but through it he saw shapes, 2, maybe 3, moving between the trees. "Stay here," he whispered, and stepped out onto the porch. The air was cold and damp. He could smell horses, sweat, and something else. "Whiskey," a voice called from the dark. "Easy, cowboy. Ain't looking for trouble." Luke's eyes narrowed. "Then why sneak through the trees?" "Didn't mean to startle," the man said. stepping into the thin light spilling from the cabin window. He wore a brown duster, hat low, eyes sharp. "Name's Harlan Gage. Me and my boys been trailing some stock thieves. Thought we saw smoke from up here." Luke didn't lower his hand from his gun. "Ain't no thieves here, just me and the lady." Harlan's eyes flicked past him to the window, where Clara's shadow moved. "Lady, huh?" he said with a smirk. "Strange place for a woman to live." "Strange place for anyone to trespass," Luke said. The man smiled thin. "You got a sharp tongue, mister. Didn't mean offense. We'll ride on." He tipped his hat and motioned to his two men. They disappeared back into the trees, horses rustling softly as they went. Luke watched them until the sound faded, then turned back inside. Clara was still at the table, her face pale. "You know 'em?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "No." But he caught the flicker in her eyes, the way her hands trembled just enough to give her away. "They weren't after cattle," Luke said quietly. "They were after something else." Clara looked up, meeting his eyes at last. "They were after me." Luke's heart stopped. "You best start talking, Clara." She took a deep breath, her voice breaking just a little. 3 years ago, I went down to the valley for supplies. Harlan Gage owned the store then. He took a liking to me I didn't want. When I refused him, he swore I'd regret it. 2 nights later, my pa's barn burned. He died inside. I've been hiding up here ever since. Luke's jaw clenched hard. "And you didn't tell me sooner?" "I didn't think you'd stay," she said quietly. "No one ever does." He exhaled slow, the anger in him fading to something heavier. Protectiveness. He finds his way back up here. He'll wish he hadn't. Clara shook her head. "He won't stop, Luke. Men like him don't stop until they've taken what they think they're owed." "Then he'll have to ride through me first," Luke said. They spent the next day readying for trouble. Luke cleaned both rifles, set trip lines around the cabin, and made sure Clara knew how to shoot if she had to. She watched him work, silent but steady. By nightfall, the tension was a living thing in the room. He sat by the fire, reloading the revolver. "You sure about staying?" he asked. Clara nodded. "If I run now, I'll be running all my life. This is my home." Luke looked at her, really looked. The way the firelight touched her hair, the quiet courage in her eyes. He realized then he'd stopped thinking of the cabin as just a place. It was her. She was what made it feel alive. When he spoke, his voice came rough. "You ain't alone no more, Clara. You got me now." She didn't answer, but her eyes said enough. For the first time since he met her, Luke felt peace settle somewhere deep in his chest. That night, he woke to the faint sound of hooves in the distance. He moved to the window, rifle ready, and saw torches flickering below the ridge. 3 riders, Harlan Gage and his men. He turned to Clara, whispering, "They're coming." She rose, pale but calm. "Then the mountain will decide." Luke frowned. "What's that mean?" She didn't answer. She just walked to the door, pressed her palm against it, and whispered something low, almost like a prayer. Outside, thunder rolled without lightning. The wind rose hard, whipping down through the trees. The horses below reared, panicked. The riders cursed, trying to hold them steady. Luke stood frozen as the sound of cracking branches echoed through the dark, like the mountain itself was waking up. Then came the scream, a man's voice, sharp and sudden, and silence. When the storm eased, only the wind remained. Luke stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand. The torches were gone. The trail below lay empty. No hoof prints, no voices. Just the mountain humming soft, like a lullaby. He turned to Clara, who stood in the doorway, eyes shining with something he couldn't name. "You said the mountain remembers," he whispered. "What did it remember tonight?" Her voice came quiet, almost tender. "A promise." The dawn came slow, gray, and quiet, like the world was holding its breath after what had happened in the night. Mist hung thick around the cabin, curling through the pines, and the creek murmured soft, carrying the last bits of storm water down the mountain. Luke Carver stepped out onto the porch, his rifle still in hand, his eyes sweeping the ridge below. There was no sign of riders, no torches, no prints in the mud. The trail was clean, too clean. It was as if the storm had swallowed every trace of Harlan Gage and his men. He felt the weight of it in his gut. He'd seen battlefields vanish under snow before, but never like this. The air felt heavy, alive, almost listening. Behind him, Clara stepped out, a shawl over her shoulders, her face pale in the soft light. "They're gone," she said quietly. "Yeah," Luke muttered. "That's the trouble. Gone without a sign." She looked out over the valley, her hands folded. "The mountain takes care of its own." Luke turned toward her, frowning. "You keep saying that like the land's got hands and a conscience." She met his eyes. "Maybe it does." He studied her a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, then. Let's say you're right. What kind of promise keeps a mountain awake at night?" Clara hesitated, the faintest tremor crossing her lips. "One made in blood." That evening, the sun came out again, painting the valley gold. Luke spent the day cutting new logs, patching what the storm had torn. The cabin felt different now, not just a shelter, but something sacred. Every sound, the crack of an axe, the groan of timber, seemed to echo deeper than before. He caught Clara watching him more than once from the porch. Her expression wasn't fear, nor was it relief. It was something in between, like she was trying to see through him, past his face, down into his heart. By dusk, the air smelled of pine smoke and stew. Luke washed his hands in the creek, the cold water numbing his skin. When he came back, Clara was stirring the pot over the fire. She looked up when he entered, her eyes reflecting the flames. "You believe me now?" she asked softly. He pulled up a chair. "Believe what?" "That the mountain chose you." Luke chuckled dryly. "You make it sound like I didn't have much say in the matter." "You didn't," she said. "Neither did I." He stared into the fire for a moment, then said, "You still owe me a story, Clara Wilder. The whole of it this time." She put the ladle down and sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. For a while, she just listened to the fire crackle. Then she said quietly, "My father used to say every man's got a debt to the land that raised him. Most folks forget to pay it." She took a breath. "When Harlan burned our barn, my pa went in trying to save the horses. The roof came down before he made it out. Ma buried him at the foot of the pines and told me the mountain don't forget its own. That night, she made me swear a promise, said I was to wait, not for revenge, but for the one who'd balance what was lost." Luke's voice came low. "And you think that's me?" She nodded. "The day you came riding up, I knew. The mountain went still. Even the wind stopped moving. It was like it had been waiting for you." Luke looked down at his calloused hands. "I ain't no savior, Clara. I done things that'd make a preacher bite his tongue." Her smile was soft but sad. "So did my pa. That's why he knew the mountain would send someone like you, someone who'd been broken, but not ruined. Later that night, the two of them sat on the porch as the stars came out. Clean, bright, endless. Clara leaned her head against the post, her hair falling loose, her eyes turned toward the sky. Luke watched her in the lamplight and felt something in him shift, something quiet and deep. He cleared his throat. "You ever think about leaving here?" She shook her head slowly. "This is all I know. Besides, some roots don't pull easy. Would you, if you could?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe, if I had someone worth leaving with." Luke's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He looked away, pretending to check the lamp. "That right?" Clara didn't answer, but her hand brushed his on the railing. Light, quick, gone in a blink. Still, it was enough. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was alive, full of things neither dared to say yet. The days that followed were kinder. The sky cleared, the snow on the ridge began to melt, and life settled into a rhythm. Luke worked the land while Clara tended to the goats in the garden. Sometimes he caught her humming that same soft tune again, the one she said kept the mountain from crying. He started humming it too, and for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't listening for trouble anymore. He was listening for her. But peace never lasts long in the West. One morning, Luke rode down the ridge to fetch supplies from the valley town. When he returned that evening, he found the front door open, the lamp cold, and the air heavy. Clara was gone. On the table lay a folded note. His hands shook as he opened it. Her handwriting was neat and small. "The promise ain't done. I'll end it before it takes you too." Luke's chest tightened. He grabbed his rifle and followed the tracks leading north through the pines. The trail climbed steep and narrow, curling around the cliffs where the wind cut sharp. Her footprints were light but clear. He followed them until he saw the glow, a campfire flickering ahead. And beside it stood Harlan Gage. He was alive, bruised, limping, but alive. His two men were dead near the edge of the cliff. Clara stood before him, her hands raised. Luke stepped from the shadows. "Let her go, Harlan." Harlan turned, blood on his mouth, laughter spilling out. "You again! The mountain's pet!" "You don't walk away from this one," Luke said. "Oh, I think I will," Harlan sneered. "I've been waiting to finish this since your old man's barn burned." That stopped Luke cold. "My what?" Harlan grinned, eyes mean. "Didn't you know, cowboy? John Maddox, the man who sold this land before it burned, he's the one who ordered it done. I just carried it out. You bought the sins of your own blood." Luke's breath caught. Clara's voice shook. "He's lying." But Harlan laughed. "Am I? Your father swore to cleanse this land. Guess the fire just took the wrong lives." Luke's world went white. Rage, hot, clean, endless, roared up inside him. He raised his gun. 2 shots cracked through the mountain air. Harlan dropped where he stood. The echo rolled away into silence. Luke's arm trembled as the smoke drifted off his pistol. He turned to Clara, his voice rough. "You knew, didn't you?" Tears streamed down her face. "I suspected. The papers said John Maddox owned this land before the fire. When you told me your name was Carver, I thought it was coincidence. I prayed it was." Luke sank to his knees, breathing hard. "Then I'm the debt. I'm the one the mountain called to pay what my kin owed." Clara knelt beside him, touching his cheek. "No. You're the one it sent to finish the promise, to end the blood." By the time they made it back to the cabin, dawn was breaking again. The sky was clean and wide, the air still. Clara buried the last of the fire's ashes near the creek and whispered something Luke couldn't hear. He stood behind her, hat in hand. What happens now? She turned, eyes soft. Now the mountain rests. So can we. Luke looked out across the land, the pines, the creek, the cabin where his life had started again. He'd lost everything once, but somehow found what he never knew he needed. A woman, a home, a peace that came only after war. He reached for Clara's hand. You still believe the mountain chooses its people? She smiled. I do. He squeezed her hand gently. Then I reckon it chose right. The two of them stood there beneath the pines as the morning light spilled down the ridge, warm and gold. The mountain loomed tall behind them, silent, watching, finally content. And for the first time in years, Luke Carver didn't feel like he was running anymore. He was home.